I paid off his family's $150,000 debt, then he told me he cheated. He thought I'd cry. He had no idea what was coming.
I paid off my husband's $150,000 family debt. Every single penny. I thought we were finally free. But right after the last payment, he looked me in the eye and admitted he'd been cheating. He thought I'd cry. He had no clue. I was about to take everything. If you love powerful, real lifestyle stories filled with betrayal, revenge, and emotional twists, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from across the USA. My name is Elena Carter, and 3 nights ago, I made the final payment on a $150,000 debt that was never mine to begin with. Jason, my husband, was glowing that evening. He hugged me from behind as I stood in our kitchen, his arms wrapped around my waist like everything was finally perfect. "We're free, babe," he whispered, breath warm against my ear. Finally. I should have felt relief, joy even, but something inside me twisted instead. Not a celebration, but a quiet, echoing ache. Still, I smiled. I always smiled. For him, for his mother, for the family that never once said thank you. The smell of baked casserole filled the air. I had poured us both glasses of red wine, lit a couple of candles. It wasn't much, but it was supposed to be a moment to breathe, a moment of peace after 5 years of sacrificing everything I had. 5 years of holding back from buying a new dress so I could cover a mortgage that wasn't mine. 5 years of draining my savings to keep Jason's mother from losing her house. Jason had said, "She's all I have left, Elle. I can't let her end up on the street." I had believed him. Even when Linda, his mother, looked at me like I was some outsider, some girl who tricked her son into marriage. Even when she said things like, "A real wife doesn't count favors." Jason always smoothed it over. He always had the right words, the perfect smile. And I, like a fool, kept choosing love over logic. That night, we had dinner with Linda at our place. She brought over her famous peach cobbler and acted like she had baked it just for me. She hadn't. She never did anything for me. But I nodded and took a slice anyway. We toasted with wine, and Jason made a little speech. "To my amazing wife," he said, raising his glass. "The strongest woman I know. I wouldn't have made it here without you." It almost felt real, hearing him say that. Almost. After dinner, Linda left early. Jason did the dishes, humming a tune. I sat at the dining table, staring at the spreadsheet on my phone that showed 0 balances next to all the loans. I should have felt proud. Then he came over, dried his hands on a towel, and sat across from me. "Elle," he said slowly, eyes locking with mine, "there's something I need to tell you." I didn't speak. I didn't blink, but inside, my breath held itself hostage. He shifted in his seat. "I didn't want to lie to you anymore, not after everything you've done. You deserve the truth." My fingers tightened around my wine glass. "I've been seeing someone," he said. "It's been going on for a few months. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did." He said her name, Tasha, a coworker, someone who gets him, he said, someone who understands how hard it is to carry all this pressure. I sat there, staring at him, not crying, not screaming, just still. He looked at me like he expected me to shatter, maybe beg, maybe slap him. But I didn't do any of that. I stood up slowly, smoothed the hem of my dress, and walked past him. I didn't say a word. I went into the studio room, locked the door behind me, and turned off the lights. My heart was hammering, not with sadness, but with something sharper, colder, older. This wasn't the beginning of the end. No. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Something he'd never see coming.
I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in the dark studio room, staring at the ceiling while shadows from the trees outside flickered against the walls. Jason didn't knock. He didn't try to explain. Maybe he thought I needed time. Maybe he thought I'd eventually forgive him, just like I had forgiven everything else. But I wasn't grieving. I was calculating. By dawn, I had already listed out the names of 2 people who would help me burn his perfect little world to the ground. The first was Maya Rivers, my best friend since college, the kind of woman who could read a room in 3 seconds flat and walk away with everyone's secrets. She had always told me Jason was too slick. That charm like his doesn't come without a hidden slip blade. The second was Colin Sanders, Jason's former business partner. They had built a small real estate firm together until something went wrong, and Jason bought Colin out for pennies. I never asked for details. Jason said it was just business. But now, I wanted to know everything. I sent Maya a voice note first, something short. "He cheated. I need you." Less than 10 minutes later, she replied, "I'll bring coffee and war paint. Be ready." By 8 a.m., she was on my couch in ripped jeans and sunglasses, sipping from a thermos like it was a ritual. "Tell me everything," she said. So, I did. The debt, the affair, the timing. How he waited until after the last payment before dropping the truth. How he smiled as if honesty was a gift and betrayal was just a messy side effect. Maya didn't flinch. She just listened. Then, slowly, she leaned back and said, "We're not going to destroy him with rage. We're going to do it with precision. I want everything he took from me, and then some." Her lips curved into something dangerous. "Then you'll need to look like the heartbroken wife, the one who's willing to give him another chance." I blinked. "You want me to forgive him?" "No," she said. "I want him to think you will." We spent hours mapping out a plan. Step 1 was to gather proof. Real, indisputable evidence. I already had financial access to most of our shared accounts. Jason had trusted me with the money. That was his first mistake. The second step was Colin. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Jason always made him out to be unstable, jealous, bitter. But now I was seeing that maybe the real reason Jason cut Colin loose was because he couldn't control him. I sent Colin a message. "I think we were both played. Want to talk?" His reply came almost immediately. "Name the place, I'll bring receipts." That night, I met him in a dim corner of a small bar outside town. He looked older, tired, but sharp-eyed. He slid a flash drive across the table without a word. "What is this?" I asked. "Everything," he said. "Bank transfers, property deals, emails. Tasha wasn't his first. She's just the one who stayed." I felt my fingers tingle. He siphoned money from our joint account before the company split, used it to invest in a little side project he started with her, some lifestyle brand. Looks innocent on the surface, but dig deeper. You'll see. I've been funding his affair, I said quietly. He nodded. You deserve better than him. And trust me, you're not the only one who wants to watch him fall. I left the bar with a cold pit in my stomach, but also something new. Control. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting to Jason's world. I was stepping out of it, rewriting the rules, reclaiming my name. When I got home, Jason was already asleep on the couch. I stood there in the doorway for a long moment, staring at the man who once told me he'd protect me from everything except himself. I walked past him, into our bedroom, and shut the door. He would never know what hit him.
Yes, pancakes. With strawberries, powdered sugar, and even that maple syrup Jason liked imported from Vermont. I poured 2 cups of coffee, 1 black, 1 with oat milk, just the way he drank it. Jason blinked at me from across the kitchen like I was some kind of ghost. "You okay?" he asked slowly, voice thick with sleep and guilt. I smiled. Not too wide, just enough. "I thought about what you said." He watched me like he didn't trust the silence between my words. "I'm hurt," I continued, "really hurt, but I don't want to throw everything away, not after what we've been through." He exhaled, a shaky, grateful kind of breath. I could see the relief ripple through his body like a drug finally hitting the bloodstream. "Elle, I didn't expect you to say that. God, I'm so sorry. I made the biggest mistake of my life." He reached for my hand. I let him. And in that moment, I realized how easy it was to wear the mask he needed me to wear. The loyal wife. The one who believes this was just a one-time thing, a lapse, a story that could still have a happy ending. But inside, I was taking notes. Later that day, I texted Maya. He bought it. She replied instantly, "Good. Now let's empty the stage before we burn the curtain." Step 2 began with a phone call to our financial advisor, pretending to be a nervous wife wanting to rebuild trust by managing our assets together. Jason, of course, agreed to everything. He saw it as a symbol, proof we were healing. I suggested putting the new investment deal, the boutique hotel project he'd been obsessing over, in both our names, just to feel secure again. He signed the documents 3 days later. Meanwhile, Maya had started phase 2, befriending Tasha. It wasn't hard. Tasha was one of those women who loved to talk about herself, especially when she thought the person listening was impressed by her lifestyle. Maya met her at a gallery opening downtown, introduced herself as an investor's consultant, and let Tasha brag her way into a confession. "She thinks Jason's going to propose," Maya told me one night on the phone. "He gave her a ring already, not official, just a promise thing. She doesn't even know he's still married." I leaned against my kitchen counter, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "She's pregnant, Elle," Maya added softly. My blood chilled. So this wasn't just a fling. This was a reroute. A whole new life Jason was trying to build, using the pieces he stole from me. I looked around our home, my home, and saw everything differently. The furniture I had picked, the walls I had painted, the curtains I had sewn by hand. He was going to take this life and hand it to someone else, like a secondhand gift. No, not without a fight. The final straw came a week later when Jason walked into our bedroom one night and said, "I think we should try therapy, together." I nodded. That's a good idea. But inside, I wasn't planning to heal. I was preparing for war. One whole document. End of chapter 3. Let me know when you're ready for chapter 4. Just say continue. And a Bilon. Continue. Chapter 4. The Blueprint of Ruin. Therapy was a farce. We went to 3 sessions. Jason cried in the first one, blaming his affair on pressure, confusion, childhood wounds, the weather, anything but himself. I nodded, played my role, and gave the therapist just enough vulnerability to make it all feel real. "I just want to feel safe again," I whispered once, eyes glassy. Jason squeezed my hand like he was saving me, and I let him believe he was. Behind the scenes, my real therapy came from numbers, account balances, property titles, and quiet signatures. With Maya's help, I had rerouted the ownership of our largest joint asset, the house, into a trust under my name. The boutique hotel project, that was mine now too. And Jason had no idea. Colin kept feeding me old email chains, invoices, even a few voice recordings, each one a reminder that Jason wasn't just careless, he was cruel. He had been building his empire on my back, hoping I'd never notice. The funny thing was, once I stopped reacting emotionally, I started seeing everything clearly, the patterns, the lies, even the tone Jason used when he was manipulating me into silence. "You always overthink things," he used to say when I asked questions. "Let me handle the hard stuff. Just trust me." I had trusted him, and he'd built a tower of sand on top of that trust. Now I was quietly sweeping away the foundation. One night, he came home late from work. His shirt smelled like citrus perfume, not his. I was waiting at the kitchen island, sipping tea like nothing was wrong. "Hey," he said, "didn't know you'd be up." I smiled. Couldn't sleep. He came around the counter, kissed my cheek. "How's everything going with the hotel stuff? Need me to look over the numbers?" I shook my head gently. "All set. The lawyer said we're good to go." He nodded, clearly pleased with himself. I almost admired how easily he lied, even to himself. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting the email that would gut his future. It was addressed to our accountant, the city inspector overseeing the hotel permits, and his business partner for the project. Subject: Immediate ownership update, Carter Holdings, LLC. Body: Dear all, please find attached the updated documentation confirming full ownership rights under my name, Elena Carter. Jason Carter has been removed from all contractual obligations effective immediately. For questions, please contact my attorney directly. Regards, Elena Carter. I didn't send it yet. Timing mattered. This wasn't just revenge. This was a reset. Then, like fate had a flair for drama, Maya called. "He proposed," she said breathlessly. I blanked. What? To Tasha, officially, little picnic in the park. He gave her the same line, by the way. "You make me feel like I can finally breathe." I pressed a hand to my chest, not from pain, just the sheer audacity of it all. "He's planning to tell you next week," Maya added. "He thinks you'll break. He's even looking for apartments already." I almost laughed. Let him. Because by the time he opens his mouth, I'll have already pulled the rug out from under him and burned it on the way out. Therapy was a farce. We went to 3 sessions. Jason cried in the first one, blaming his affair on pressure, confusion, childhood wounds, the weather, anything but himself. I nodded, played my role, and gave the therapist just enough vulnerability to make it all feel real. "I just want to feel safe again," I whispered once, eyes glassy. Jason squeezed my hand like he was saving me, and I let him believe he was. Behind the scenes, my real therapy came from numbers, account balances, property titles, and quiet signatures. With Maya's help, I had rerouted the ownership of our largest joint asset, the house, into a trust under my name. The boutique hotel project, that was mine now too, and Jason had no idea. Colin kept feeding me old email chains, invoices, even a few voice recordings. Each one a reminder that Jason wasn't just careless, he was cruel. He had been building his empire on my back, hoping I'd never notice the weight. The funny thing was, once I stopped reacting emotionally, I started seeing everything clearly. The patterns, the lies, even the tone Jason used when he was manipulating me into silence. "You always overthink things," he used to say when I asked questions. "Let me handle the hard stuff. Just trust me." I had trusted him, and he'd built a tower of sand on top of that trust. Now I was quietly sweeping away the foundation. One night, he came home late from work. His shirt smelled like citrus perfume, not his. I was waiting at the kitchen island, sipping tea like nothing was wrong. "Hey," he said, "didn't know you'd still be up." I smiled. Couldn't sleep. He came around the counter, kissed my cheek. "How's everything going with the hotel stuff? Need me to look over the numbers?" I shook my head gently. "All set. The lawyer said we're good to go." He nodded, clearly pleased with himself. I almost admired how easily he lied, even to himself. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting the email that would gut his future. It was addressed to our accountant, the city inspector overseeing the hotel permits, and his business partner for the project. Subject: Immediate ownership update, Carter Holdings, LLC. Body: Dear all, please find attached the updated documentation confirming full transfer of ownership rights under my name, Elena Carter. Jason Carter has been removed from all contractual obligations effective immediately. For questions, please contact my attorney directly. Regards, Elena Carter. I didn't send it yet. Timing mattered. This wasn't just revenge. This was a reset. Then, like fate had a flair for drama, Maya called. "He proposed," she said breathlessly. I blanked. "What?" "To Tasha, officially. Little picnic in the park. He gave her the same line he gave you, by the way. You make me feel like I can finally breathe." I pressed a hand to my chest, not from pain, just the sheer audacity of it all. "He's planning to tell you next week," Maya added. "He thinks you'll break. He's even looking for apartments already." I almost laughed. Let him. Because by the time he opens his mouth, I'll have already pulled the rug out from under him and burned it on the way out. I waited until a Friday evening. I suppose he thought the timing would soften the blow, give me the weekend to process. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, the sky outside painted in oranges and purples, a perfect scene for the heartbreak he assumed was coming. "Elle," he said, standing in the living room doorway with his hands awkwardly in his pockets, "can we talk?" I closed my laptop slowly, keeping my expression unreadable. "Sure." He sat across from me, his shoulders tense, but his eyes almost hopeful. I already knew what he was going to say. I had replayed this scene 100 times in my head, but I let him speak anyway. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, and I fought the urge to smirk. Thinking, in Jason's vocabulary, meant justifying. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, "but I've realized I'm not the man you need anymore. We've grown apart. We want different things." I tilted my head. "Different things?" He nodded. You want structure, a family, roots. I want freedom. I want to feel alive again. And there it was, the recycled line, feel alive. I wondered how many women he had fed that to. There's someone else, he admitted, his voice dripping with forced remorse. Tasha, you might have guessed. I said nothing. He went on, like a man rehearsing his part in a play. I never meant for it to happen, but it did, and I want to be honest. I think we should separate, peacefully. He exhaled, like a man who had done something noble. I stared at him for a beat too long. Then, calmly, I asked, "Are you done?" He blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, I think that's everything." Good. I stood up, walked to the kitchen counter, and pulled out a sleek black folder I had hidden in the drawer. "What's that?" he asked. I handed it to him. "Your exit package." Jason opened it, eyes scanning page after page of neatly printed documents, ownership transfers, legal notices, account closures. What is this?" he murmured. "That's what's left of your empire," I said softly, "which, in case you forgot, was built on my back." He shook his head in disbelief. Wait, hold on. You can't." "I can," I cut in, and I did. He looked up, face turning red. "You tricked me." "No, Jason. I trusted you. You tricked me. I just returned the favor, with interest." His voice cracked. "You don't have the right." "I have every right," I snapped. "I cleared your mother's debt. I covered your lies. I watched you throw away a marriage I bled for, and all while you were playing house with someone else." He looked around the room, like maybe the walls would come to life and defend him. What am I supposed to do now? I took a step closer, lowered my voice to a razor-sharp whisper. "Survive, just like I did. Every time you made me feel small, every time you told me to trust you, every time you smiled while robbing me blind." He dropped the folder. It hit the floor with a dull slap. I didn't flinch. "You have 1 week," I said, "to get out of my house. After that, the locks change." "Elena?" "Don't." I looked over my shoulder. "You made your choice. This is just the bill."
Jason moved out 5 days later. He didn't fight, not because he accepted guilt, but because he was still in shock. Like his brain hadn't caught up with the fact that the quiet, loyal wife he had underestimated for years had outmaneuvered him at every turn. He left with 2 suitcases, his gaming console, and the kind of stunned silence that only comes from realizing the house of cards he built was never his. I watched from the upstairs window as he loaded his car, his posture slumped, shoulders tight with unspoken curses. He never looked up. Not once. Maybe he couldn't bear to. I didn't wave goodbye. That night, I opened a bottle of champagne alone, not because I was celebrating, but because I was done mourning. My marriage had already died months ago. I was just now burying the body. Maya came over around 10, barefoot and grinning like the devil. She dropped a bag of tacos on the table and tossed her purse aside. "So," she said, flopping onto the couch, "how does it feel to be a free woman and full property owner of 2 prime assets?" I took a long sip of my drink. It feels quiet. Like peaceful or quiet like eerie? I looked around the room. The house that once felt heavy with tension now held something lighter. Still. Clean. Like I can finally breathe, I said. She smirked. "That's his line, remember?" "Yeah. But this time, it's real." Over tacos, we laughed. About everything. About how Jason thought therapy would fix what his conscience broke. About how Tasha was now tethered to a man she didn't know was broke and legally gutted. "Oh," she said between bites. "Speaking of which, Colin sent me this." She handed me her phone. On screen was a forwarded email chain. Jason had tried to re-enter a business deal under a different name. The city had flagged it and rejected the application. He was scrambling. Tasha's going to figure it out soon. Once the baby comes and he can't provide half of what he promised, she'll leave him, I said quietly. And he'll blame her, then me, then everyone but himself. Maya nodded. Do you care? I thought about it. Truly. And then I answered, no. The next few weeks passed like the first breaths after a storm. Tentative, still wet with memory, but warmer somehow. I met with my lawyer, finalized paperwork, officially moved the hotel project into a solo venture under my brand, repainted the bedroom, got rid of the bed. I even started seeing a real therapist alone this time, the kind who didn't just ask, how do you feel, but also, why did you allow it? That one hit me hard. I didn't have the full answer yet, but I knew I had stopped asking myself that question when I stopped making Jason the center of my life. It was the beginning of something better. Not just revenge. Not just healing. Power. Not over him, but over myself. I found out from a news alert on my phone. A local blog had picked up the story. Real estate entrepreneur Jason Carter accused of fraudulent loan practices. I sat in my car, parked outside my favorite little cafe, sipping on an iced latte when I read the headline. My hands didn't tremble, my heart didn't skip. I simply smiled. Jason's collapse wasn't just personal anymore. It had gone public. Colin had warned me that something like this was coming. When you cut corners long enough, the circle comes back around, he said. Apparently, Jason had tried using the boutique hotel paperwork, my paperwork, as collateral for a private loan. The bank caught on, and once the false signatures were flagged, the entire loan trail started unraveling. The blog mentioned investigations, lawsuits pending, and phrases like civil liability and fraudulent misrepresentation. My phone buzzed. Maya, tell me you saw the article, devil. I replied with a screenshot and a single word, karma. The best part? I hadn't lifted a single finger. I'd already cleaned my hands. Jason had built his own guillotine. All I'd done was make sure the rope didn't snap. That evening, I got a message from a blocked number. My breath caught for a moment. I opened it anyway. You win. Happy now? Jay. I stared at the screen. It wasn't a question of happiness. It was about closure, and Jason still didn't understand that. He thought this was a contest. He thought I played to win. He was wrong. I played to be free. I deleted the message without replying. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner party. Just Maya, Colin, a couple of colleagues. We drank wine on the patio, laughing under string lights I had strung up myself. For once, the conversations didn't circle around a man, a mistake, or a mess. I looked around that evening and felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not the hollow kind, the full kind. The kind that comes when you've cleaned house. Not just the furniture, but the parts of yourself you let others walk through without taking their shoes off. Tasha messaged Maya a few days later. Apparently, she had finally left Jason. She was 3 months pregnant, working part-time, living in her sister's basement. She wants to meet, Maya said. You want me to tell her to get lost? I thought about it for a moment. Then I shook my head. No, I said. Tell her I'll meet her, just once. Maya raised an eyebrow. Why? Because, I said, we need to stop making men like Jason our only point of connection. And maybe she needed to hear the truth from someone who had already survived him. We met at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday. Tasha looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way that went beyond her slim figure. Her eyes were tired,
her coat too thin for the weather. She clutched her tea like it was the last warm thing in her world. She stood when I arrived, unsure whether to smile or shrink. "Elena," she said softly, "thank you for coming." I sat down across from her and nodded. "You asked. I'm here." She hesitated. "I don't know what to say." I folded my hands on the table. "Then I'll go first." Her eyes widened slightly. "I don't hate you, Tasha," I began, "and I don't pity you either. What happened between you and Jason wasn't about me. It was about two people chasing the same illusion, him." Her throat bobbed with a hard swallow. "He told me he felt alive with you," I continued. "He told me the same thing when we first met, and probably someone before me too. That feeling, it's not real. It's a trick. Jason doesn't fall in love. He falls in love with the reflection of power, and when it fades, so does he." She looked down at her cup. "I'm not here to punish you," I said, "but you should know who he really is. The lies, the debt, the theft. He didn't just break a marriage. He built his entire identity on using people and convincing them it was love." Tasha sniffed. "He told me you were cold, controlling." I smiled faintly. Of course he did. A man like that always needs a villain. She looked up at me then, really looked. "I didn't know. About the money, the house, everything." "I believe you." A long silence followed. Then, very quietly, she asked, "What do I do now?" It was a simple question, one I had asked myself not so long ago. I leaned forward. "You start over," I said, "but this time you build a life that doesn't depend on someone else's promises. You fight for your own name, your own peace. No more waiting for someone to save you." Tasha wiped her eyes with a napkin. "You're stronger than I thought." I nodded. That's what he thought too, until I stopped needing him. We parted outside the cafe. She pulled her coat tighter around her belly and said goodbye. I watched her walk away into the gray drizzle, hoping, maybe, just maybe, she would do things differently this time. I climbed into my car and sat there for a moment, watching the rain streak across the windshield. So much of my life had been spent waiting, for love, for validation, for a man to keep his word. Now, I wasn't waiting for anything. I had a new studio space downtown, my own business, my own vision. I had people beside me who spoke truth instead of flattery. I had silence when I wanted it, and music when I didn't. I had me, and for the first time, that was more than enough. As I drove away from the cafe, I didn't look back, because the road ahead was mine. The end.